see something of that behavior even show up, even just sort of like, yeah, no, I'm not really feeling that great. Would you be able to take the dog out? There's just that small little voice, just like, it's happening again. It's happening again. All right. Hi, I'm Dabber Kamani, and this is Conversation with a Friend. Right now we're...
That's
Oh, I'm so
staying in
sorry.
there.
Sorry, that's your line. Continue.
All right. Hi, Braden. Welcome to a conversation with a friend. I call Braden Mr.B, and I've known you for since elementary, right? Like grade 7 is when you came in?
I would say grade 7, yep.
Yeah, so a very long time. And so if I'm calling you Mr. B through the show, that's the reason why. It's a nickname I gave Mr. B a long time ago because he's a boss. That's all there is to it.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
Well, anyways, okay, before I start telling people how amazing I think you are, do you want to just introduce yourself?
So I get to talk about how amazing I am. Lovely.
Yes.
All right. I'm just kidding. My name's Braden Thorvaldsen. I am 29 years old, and I had a birthday recent enough that I needed to actually think about how old I was. Born and raised in Calgary. Moved to Ottawa about 5 years ago for work. Yeah, bachelor's in economics, master's in public policy, and it has a crippling addiction to comic books. Crippling.
Oh, don't forget to mention your podcast because I think that's
Oh
pretty awesome.
Jesus!
You're my first
Yes,
celebrity guest, dude.
yes, yes. The thing I've been doing for almost 2 years. Also, I'm the host of a podcast called What? Explain. It's a weird sort of fact. It's a weird and interesting facts podcast. Just going into its third season. We're looking at sort of a June or July start. But yeah, I was just gonna say, if you have time and want to listen to this voice narrate a 10 to 30-minute story about an interesting fact from history, it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and honestly, at this point, pretty much wherever you can find podcasts.
Yep, and it's informative, soothing, and frankly, like I find it's really, really well done. Mr. B knows what he's doing. Again, he's a boss, so take my word
Oh,
for
yeah.
it, guys, and
Oh,
check it
I was
out.
gonna say from season 2 onwards, I can only take partial credit. I would just say thanks to my lovely audio engineer Craig, who is a delight. Highly recommend.
There you go. Craig better watch this.
I was just gonna say at this point, yes, it's just sort of like yes. I listen. I compliment him at the end of every episode, so at this point, he knows we're
He feels the
friends.
love. All right, good,
Yeah.
good, good. Shout out to Craig then, and I'll make sure
Mhm.
I post a link to it in the description so that
I
people can
I
easily find
need to
it.
make sure to give you a link to put in the description. I'm new to
Perfect.
the promotion thing because this is the first time I've been on another podcast with actually something to promote.
Wait,
I'm new at this. I'm
uh,
so new at this.
so were you in a podcast before that without something to promote?
Yes. No, I was on. I was a
We're
frequent
promoting
user.
other ones now, so let's do
Oh
it.
yeah, no, absolutely. This is going to be the most plug heavy like first 10 minutes of your podcast. I'll just be throwing links at you left, right, and center. It'll be fine.
Perfect.
I was a frequent guest on a show called the Millennial Cast, which
Oh,
was I was just gonna say which was two formerly West Coast based millennials, Sarah and Christina, talking about all things millennial based. I was on their comic book episode and their D&D episode. D&D
nice.
being Dungeons and Dragons, not Department of National Defense or whatever combination. Listen, if I've learned anything in Ottawa, acronyms are good. It can mean about 28 different things, so sometimes it's nice to specify.
Yes. LOL
Yep,
does not always mean lots of
no,
love.
it does not. No, it does not.
All right. Okay. So going back to how you introduced yourself. Well, actually, let's talk about your podcast first. So, what inspired that for you?
Well, I have the short, pithy answer in which, sometimes you just need to hear, as a cishet white man, sometimes I just felt that my voice wasn't being heard enough. That's the pithy, sarcastic answer. Probably the more accurate and honest answer since, well, this is the show. my life was sort of crumbling around me a little bit,
Hmm.
kind of around October 2020, and I was sort of in desperate need of something that not necessarily that I could control, but at the very least that I could put effort into. It would go out in the world and just sort of like, yes, I made a thing. This thing, it might not be the best of things. It is a thing that I made that I can put my name on. It's just like, yes, I made this thing.
Honestly, that's amazing. I would suggest to do that to anyone. But why specifically a podcast? Like, was there something in particular that made you inspired you that way?
Um, I, I mean, I do enjoy writing things down. I enjoy writing. I enjoy sort of learning new things. Like a lot of the things that I wrote about, and talk about on the podcast.
Hmm.
I had like a vague idea, like sort of like the stinger. Like, for example, I'll just use I'll use my first episode one. Uh, Long story short, two of Dr. Seuss's most famous books were basically brought into creation because two different people just said, "Hey, I bet you can't write a word. I bet you can't write a book basically using only these like 250 words that every grade school kid could know." And Dr. Seuss, or Dr. Seuss, as technically his last name is, and just fought it for 25 years and then just leaned into it. Just, yeah, I'm Dr. Seuss. Sure. You've made me a millionaire. Fine, mispronounce my name. But yeah, no, and basically just sort of like, all right, I take a fact, research it a little bit, sort of write it into sort of a hopefully sensical thing. I basically sort of try and like boil down a topic into like 10 to, I think I had one 30-minute episode.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just try and just like, okay, once you've listened to it, you've learned something.
No, that's awesome.
And
And
I sort of
mhm.
went to a podcast because writing it kind of in a blog format was just like, okay, that's interesting, but it doesn't really scratch almost the performing itch that I had. Kind of
Mm,
like, as you know, October 2020 hadn't really talked to many people.
right.
And in a past life, I used to do some acting. So it's just sort of like, yeah, I sort of missed that thing. So periodically, I just lean into the narrator voice just a little bit. And
Uh,
then,
do you mind if we dig into that a little bit? Because I don't know. I've seen your past performances and some of them, and I love them, right? And I used to also be like a bit of a drama person for a little bit back in the day. And for me, doing things like, drama club and stuff, it was a way of releasing parts of yourself that weren't there or like that you don't necessarily do normally, as well as I guess increasing the tempos for certain aspects you have internally in you that like,
mhm.
you can showcase better. So I guess my question to you is for you, what is drama and performance and stuff, what does that mean to you?
Honestly, kind of a little bit of a similar thing,
Hmm.
because basically, when I first started acting, like in my first year of university, I had paralyzing stage fright.
Right.
And sort of like and just like, I had sort of a combination of, I really wanted to do something dramatic, like sort of like in drama sense, not like a flip a table sort of dramatic, but.
Although they can go
Uh,
hand in hand.
oh, God, do I know it. But yeah, no, and also, I was distinctly convinced, kind of in my more anxious moments, that if I were to go on the stage,
Mhm.
my life as I knew it would be over. So the sort of the potentially not mentally healthy way to start thinking about it was like, okay, like for my first part, I was auditioning for like the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. I was just like,
Mhm.
no, 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 these people are not here to see Braden Thorvaldsen. They're just here to see a guy be the White Rabbit. They could not care less about Braden Thorvaldsen. This
Mhm.
is fine. This is fine. They don't care one way or the other. They need the white. I would say they're here to see like the White Rabbit and something do this thing. And
Mhm.
that I was just sort of like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that thing.
That's awesome. And do you mind if I ask? Because like you also do. I know this. I know you do an insane amount of D&D, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, right? Dungeons and Dragons, as you said.
Mhm.
So,
Always got to check. Mhm.
pardon?
Always good to clarify. Always good to clarify the acronyms.
I'm gonna keep this in mind. I might go back to a conversation with Damien and just edit that just to make sure people know.
Okay, yeah, just like put it. Well, I mean for Damien it made sense, but I just have a solid appreciation for just every time you say D and then just present Davert, you just loop in. I need Dungeons and Dragons, and then just
Just put it through. Yep, yep.
yep.
Yeah, but with that, do you feel like that also scratches the acting thing? Because I don't know if you heard the conversation with Damien, but he was explaining what D&D means to him,
Mhm.
and I was wondering, is it similar for you, or is there something more to it for you? Let's just assume no one ever heard Damien's conversation.
Fine. To me, I'm currently just actually kind of as of last week just finished up like an dungeon mastering an 18-month long campaign,
Dude,
and
nice.
just sort of like periodically just sort of like with some one shot sort of like basically one session long things, which is a bit unusual for Dungeons and Dragons because
Mhm.
they tend to go for longer campaigns like over 10, 20, 40. In this case, like 55 sessions. But yeah, I'd say again, every dungeon master's a little bit different. For me, I lean towards it a lot more like my strength is a lot more like great. I'll be 22 characters. I'm fine with that. I've got a funny voice for a few different things. If you want to have like four different townspeople going around and like a grouchy innkeeper, what do you want? I'd say the aggravated bartender. Hubert, stop it! You're driving away the customers. Come on in, dear. Come on in, dear. It's fine. I would say, and it just like I'd say like a sellsword at the bar. Oh God, they're doing this again. It's okay. It's okay. No, you hear about the you hear about the bounty. It's okay. Come on, come on. But yeah, like basically voices are a bit more of my strong suit, so I
Mhm.
lean a bit more towards all right, have some interesting characters to do rather than like some dungeon masters have sort of like an like a pretty decently generated like world that they've created themselves or just like or they're sort of like they have played a significant amount of XCOM in their lives, so they are very, very good at making monsters highly efficient.
I love how the connection was XCOM. Just
I was just genuinely thinking like, what's a small combat thing and just it's XCOM. That's pretty much what
so
it's
true.
XCOM.
So true. I like that. So you got your creativity through all of that, and then you connected that back
Yeah.
to the podcast because a podcast is also a voice thing, right? And so there has to be
A
like
little
a
bit. Like there's very much a different tone from like conversational Braden and
yeah,
narrating.
yeah,
There's a
exactly.
difference between the two.
Yeah, yeah. Again, most soothing thing I've ever heard. Again, shout out to Craig, but it's
I was just saying, absolutely, he makes me sound very good.
but a lot of it is also your personality and stuff, right? Like the way you're able to calm it down and stuff and narrate it the way. Do you think you got a lot of that practice from like dungeon mastering in D&D, or is it like
Um,
night and day different?
I'd say almost night and day different.
Okay.
Is actually a not insignificant part of like my sort of like delivery for what explain is pretty much stolen part and parcel from another podcast called Lore.
Okay.
I say, and a lot of it's just sort of like, all right, it's a 20 to 25 minute long thing. Like they're all individual episodes. And sort of again told in a bit more of a narratory tone, with just the occasional sort of like witty aside put in. But yeah, just a lot of it. I
The,
mean,
the,
admittedly, the host of Lore, Aaron Mankey, goes a lot more towards like the grim gothic stuff, and
yeah,
I'm just sort of aggressive generalist.
man, I think
Everything's everything's a little bit interesting to me, so it's like, great, let's follow this.
I love that. I love that. That's what I like, always continuous improvement and learning and stuff, right?
Mhm.
Just
Oh, absolutely.
follow a chain. Um,
Mhm.
okay, and then you were also talking about comic books, right? That was the other thing that you mentioned as your passion.
Yes, yes.
Is there a connection between like the stories that you see in there and how you're able to connect that to like the creativity with D&D? And then sorry, all of that stuff feels like, there must be interconnectivity in how your creativity flows, right? Do you find that to be the case or?
I, to an extent, yes. I would say the comic books that I like a lot more, they tend to be kind of, if not like the full-on interconnected world like Marvel or DC has,
Yeah.
they tend to, at the very least, generate an interesting world to me. Like
Hmm.
sort of like the top off the top of my head, one of them I'm reading right now is called Stillwater. It's by Chip Starsky and Ramon Perez, I believe. There, but yeah. Long story short, a lot of the thing comes in is that there's a town called Stillwater in which nobody dies. Nobody has died for a significant period of time. Like people have gotten grievously injured, horrifically injured. They have not died, and a not insignificant portion of like some of the side parts are just like how like that world works. Okay, like once you put that in of like, okay, in this town nobody dies, nobody can die. How does that like affect things? How has this not been spread to the wide world? Like how have they managed to keep that out?
Right. Hmm.
What has failed for what has been the event for that sort of thing to start in, etc. and so forth. Like that sort of thing I find is in the comic books I like, and it's kind of looping it back to the creativity thing. It's That's kind of some of my favorite sessions to run.
Yeah.
Like if my players are just kind of like if I give my players something interesting, like and just sort of like, for example, like basically an island in which there are 20 wrecked ships.
Yeah.
There
Hmm.
are no bodies. There are just 20 wrecked ships. I would say just on an island, no animals, no I would say no animals, no sounds of bird song, lots of plants. What happened here?
Man, you really get them thinking, eh? It's like what questions to
Yeah, no,
ask them.
the same
Okay.
sort of like, all right, I've got an answer in mind, but I kind of like, okay, I'll give you a mystery. I'll give you a thing to keep you involved. And for Dungeons and Dragons related, I've been lucky enough to sort of have a group that's just like, okay, I'm willing to go in on this. Let's figure this out. Let's figure this out. Let's use our skills and powers and whichever they have to try and figure this out.
That's really cool. The other big thing that happened with you, you said you moved to Ottawa, right? And I know you've lived in Calgary your entire life. Did you find that to be a pretty big struggle in regards to like moving and the things that are associated with that?
For an extent, yes, I did. I would say it wasn't necessarily like an immediate thought of, yeah, I'm just gonna pack up and head 2,800 kilometers east.
Hmm.
I was going to school for oil and gas economics. I was to say, and again, I apologize if this gets a little inside baseball for your listeners, but for all intents and purposes, like I'd sort of had the thought of, you know what, odds are I'd get hired by an oil and gas company at some point. However, I started the oil and gas specialization in economics when oil was $110 a barrel.
Oh,
So,
jeez.
pretty profitable when you sell it off.
Hmm.
I I was in my last semester, it was $36 a barrel, considerably less profitable.
Just a little
So,
bit.
kind of at that point, I, I think probably in the single greatest use of all of my economic learning, I took a look and just, yeah, I don't think I'm going to get hired. I just don't think I'm gonna get hired with this. So I thought of my options and just like, okay, you know what? I need to get a master's in some variety. Like just sort of like just stay in school, see what there is. I was living in my parents' basement at the time, so shall we say my overhead costs were minimal. So I found out that the University of Calgary has a school of public policy, which is sort of like super interesting to me because I like the idea of being able to help people kind of in a macro sense. Like just sort of like help people like try and make their lives better at the very least. Again, with that hopeless idealist in me. But yeah, no, I would say I ended up sort of doing my master's program, which taught me a lot of things, but it also aged me 5 to 10 years. Oh, all night classes.
Oh God, that's not good for
Yeah.
as someone that does shift work right now, I can yeah, good luck,
Mhm.
dude.
Yeah, did not. I would just say, but yeah, no, it was. I was just saying I'm still close with a lot of the people that I met there. Like I'd say good people came. I would say good people came through it. It's good information to have. And I got a job offer kind of like halfway through writing my thesis.
That's
So I
amazing.
basically just sort of like I basically ended up just sort of finishing off my like basically handing in my paper copy of a thesis in there, and a week later I was off to Ottawa.
Actually, sorry, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but
Mm-hmm.
you said you like the idea of helping people in a macro sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, like I know you as a person, and I know that you're a very genuine and loving person. That's why we've been friends for so long. I can always rely on you. But I just wanted to ask, um, on a higher level, do you feel like your job needs to match something in regards to your desire? So, like, you get a fulfillment out of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think your job needs to, like, in your opinion, does it need to connect to that helping people aspect?
For me, it helps.
Hmm.
I'd say for all intents and I mean, you can like. There's a lot of people that can be loving parents, loving members of their community,
Hmm.
do a bunch of things, but can also sometimes work in like a field like some in which some of them do have like either inadvertent or just like direct bad effects on people. And like I don't necessarily I would say it helps. I would
Hmm.
say like it would help. Like I wouldn't necessarily want to spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week at a job where I felt like I'm making people's lives worse.
Mm,
Like
right.
I would not want to do that. Like that would be difficult for me. Like I mean, there are people that I don't think there's many. I would say because again, absolutes are difficult,
No,
if
no,
not
no.
impossible to prove. I would say a significant portion of people are not going to work thinking, "Yeah, I'm just gonna fuck a bunch of people over today."
Yeah, no, and I think a good example of that is like parking ticket officers, right? People genuinely don't like them, but they are a necessity to keep people in line. But like, not everyone could do that because you're technically, punishing people for parking in the wrong areas or things like that,
Mhm,
right? And you can't really give too much rope there either. Otherwise, you give a little rope, people can take a lot and stuff. So I see what you're
mhm,
saying. So there doesn't
mhm,
necessarily need to be a correlation. But
mhm.
for you, it helps make the job a little more um, valued, right?
Yes, like there's some value added in it for me at the very least. Like I feel better. Like just sort of
Okay.
like, okay, I'm doing a thing that's sort of like it is in the macro sense. Again, I'm just sort of saying that a lot. Like
Yeah.
in like the big because again, I'm not like in a client facing industry for lack of a better word. Like I'm not in direct contact with people, but I'm just like, okay, I can provide the information kind of a little bit further up that's just like, okay, this could help inform this thing, which could then
Hmm.
create a policy which can help, you know,
Right.
a bunch of people.
So speaking of that, what are some of the other qualities that made you decide to get into masters in public policy and into like your bachelor's
Mhm.
degree is also I find it's quite rare, right? Like not a lot of people follow that route. I think of Moneyball every time I think of you. I'm not even gonna lie. So
Uh,
it's
uh,
like
are we talking the Brad Pitt? What are the Jonah? Are we talking the Brad Pitt character or the Jonah Hill character?
looks wise Brad Pitt,
Oh, oh,
mentally
oh,
Jonah Hill.
that's
I'll
fair.
give you both. I'll give you both. You're Mr. B.
Oh shucks. Um, I'd say for I mean a lot of it was just sort of like economics for me. I kind of liked that it was a bit more of a generalist discipline a little bit for all intents. Like a lot of it is basically high level summary. You know how, or at least you know or you have an idea of how like different things affect the economy.
Mm,
Again, I'm not going to go into too big an example, but
yeah.
just to use like the chocolate bar sort of thing of great, if all of a sudden the price of chocolate bars dropped to 50 cents, all of a sudden people are going to want to buy a lot more of them than if they went up to $4.
Hmm.
And then just it's all variants on that really. I sort of like being able to have an idea of how things work.
Right.
And economics for me, I think, help feed into that because, again, depending on your philosophical outpoint, in the whole greed is good, I would say, we're all like directed by money sort of thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Then it's just, then that sort of thing about it. But I don't think it's like the be all end all. Money is how people work sort of deal.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, no, and I agree. I agree. That's awesome. And then going forward though, are you like have any of your thoughts and processes changed over the years in regards to, where you want to see your career going or in regards to that? Because like you have so many hats right now, and like the more I'm thinking about it, you're a a dungeon master, you're a podcast host, you're freaking a comic book nerd to the extreme in the best way. You're an actor, right? And parts of it are
Don't
there.
forget you're a Twitch streamer.
A Twitch streamer, right? And then you're working a full-time job. You're a good friend and you're able to maintain good relations with people. I know I'm interjecting this part in there, but this is like I
No, no,
know
no,
this.
please, please, please. This is going to be just like my introduction to the podcast now forever. I'll just copy and paste this in. Just, yeah.
Yeah, but
What
like
do you think is all true?
yeah, right? But like doing all of those things, and then you also like moved like a while recently again, right? Like managing all of those different hats together, like how the hell do you do that? And does that change your priorities in life or like how you're viewing the future going? Because that's so many things.
You're not wrong, and honestly, I think I might go past the future in my answer, like in terms of like how things have changed. But my career has changed a lot. Like I'd say like basically what I thought I'd do, quote, when I grow up has
Mhm,
changed a lot. Like when I first graduated high school, I was thought for sure I'd be an actuarial scientist, like an actuary.
mhm,
And I was just like, yeah, I was good with math. I wasn't that good with people. So it just seems like, yeah, no, I could totally do that. And for like the first 2 years of my bachelor's degree, I was in actuarial science. And then I went to a sort of like an industry meeting of actuaries. Like I got sort of an invite to that. And after that 2 hour luncheon, I no longer wanted to be an actuary. So again, just things change a lot. I would say then I went into economics, thought I'd be like working in oil and gas for a while. That didn't necessarily pan out. So it's like, okay. And for all intents and purposes, I've sort of lived my life in a relatively state of like in a pretty decent state of flux in terms of like future plans. Like how do I do it? I just concentrate on one thing at a time and then see which hat lands on there. Just like I mean, admittedly, some hats, to keep on using that hat metaphor,
yeah.
some of the hats take priority. Like, if I stopped working, that's a problem. Like, without the work, you can't pay the rent, and I was saying the nice little ring light goes away. But yeah, no, I'd say everything else with that, it does, to an extent, it does feel like a little bit like, okay, sometimes I feel I overextend a little bit, so sometimes a lot of it is trying for me to try and maintain a balance in that.
Mhm,
Like that's one of the reasons why I was just like, yeah, the third season of What Explain isn't going out immediately. I'm gonna push it out to June or July so I can get 7 or 8 episodes in the can. So I'm not like stressing out Craig, my audio engineer, by just like, hey, this is here Friday. I kind of need it by Monday, please. But yeah, no, I'd say a lot of it's just sort of so I can have more fun with it, sort of take a bit more time, do a few more edits, because most of the time, like for the entirety of that show,
yeah.
I was sort of what you heard from basically impetus to everything was also done like within that 2 week span. Like
Mm.
once it got released, it's just sort of a oh Jesus, I need another one. Um, 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 and then I go into my 28-page Google document of like just things I type in. It's like, oh, that's it. Oh, that's interesting. I'm just gonna say somebody stole Napoleon's penis. Enter and just leave that be. And just leave that be. And then 3 years later, I look at it and just, oh, that could be a Valentine's Day special.
I'm sorry, I watched that preview this morning and I can't stop laughing. Stop.
Yeah,
It was
listen.
so unexpected at the end. It's like, what the
Nobody expects the stolen penis. Nobody ever expects the stolen penis. And I hope that exact phrase is what the title of this
hell?
episode is now.
I'm down
Nobody.
for it if you are. Just- oh my God. Okay. That's going at the beginning of the video.
That's all I would say. That's the stinger. That's the stinger. Just like
Yes.
what? Oh,
Perfection.
but yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'd say Jesus. Going back a few things because I'm trying to get better with the whole finishing a tangent thing.
Hmm.
A lot of it was just sort of a thing I tried. I found I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like the Twitch streaming, I'll just sort of I'll play some form of Soulsborne game, like a Dark Souls game, a Bloodborne. Currently doing Elden Ring right now.
Nice.
I take a d20 like a 20-sided dice.
Yeah.
I roll it, and what depending on sort of usually I post like a list of 20 different impressions I do, and whichever one lands is that's the one I use. Like as in like say Elmer Fudd is running through Dark Souls.
Hmm.
Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting revenants.
Dude,
As I
I love
speak,
how you're
I
still.
speak.
Sorry, I love how you're still like blending all these other skills together. So it's like everything that you're doing, it's still working towards I guess for a lack of word, finding a improved version of yourself. Like uh, is that
Oh, I would say that's sort of again. I would say honestly, if you don't, to me, if I haven't learned something or done something, I need to, in some way, shape, or form, like learn something new, try something new. Maybe I'll fail spectacularly.
yeah.
Try.
Well, I think the thing is like a lot of people like learn things, right? Learning things is not hard, right? Like you can go out, you can listen to something and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
what you're doing is you're applying it consistently, right? And I think that's where the real difficulty is because application of the things that you learn is very difficult. Even I stopped doing interviews for like a few days because of work, right? And I
Sure.
felt drained for some reason. I was wondering what's going on. And then the first few interviews that I did after that, like of course they're not posted or anything, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that the level of understanding I was having of those people's lives and stuff, it like went down dramatically, and then had to
Oh
relearn how to do
no.
that. Yeah, no, I noticed that it was fine because they were like very articulate in how they were
Mm-hmm.
talking and stuff, but I noticed that immediately, right? That's just like a small example of just like
Mm-hmm.
I learned all these things, stopped applying it, suddenly it's gone, and then you got to relearn it and reapply it. But
Oh no, I absolutely totally get that. Like, because again, like you're still relatively, as in, I don't know quite how many of these interviews you've done. I know at least five. I know at least
yes,
five, but again, like it's a thing, like it's a muscle, like it's a muscle memory of a sort. Like you're just sort of like, again, like you're learning, and if you just sort of like, yeah, so you learn a few chords in guitar, and then you sort of put it away for a couple of days, and then you
yeah,
just sort of like, I just
there's
sort
like
of like hey, my fingers hurt again trying to
yeah.
do an act. I'm saying just this doesn't quite my fingers don't quite stretch the way they need to.
But what I find impressive about you, and I think I've seen this because again we've known each other for so long, is that you seem to constantly apply those things, right, to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it very much showcases. So I'm even thinking about like some of the acting stuff that you did versus the D&D stuff, and like it just wow, I'm impressed,
Just
Mr.
a
B.
lot of, I I try to make my hobbies involve reading or just doing a lot of voices. That's the trick.
That's the
That's the
trick.
trick. That's the trick.
I will keep that in mind. Life hack right there. Just
Yep. Just reading and lots of voices.
reading of voices.
Yep.
All right. I have another question for you in that regard. So, w with all of these things, a lot of people that I've talked to, right? They talk about how, well, okay. So, two of the concerns that people brought up. Number one is passion and career, right? So, a lot of people feel like their passions need to come from outside of their career, right? I just wanted your thoughts on that a little bit because you do have so many different hats that you're juggling, but you're also pursuing your passions like proactively and not even in like a very baseline way. Like you're going out of your way to make it more showcased and like, do something a little more with each thing. So, what are some of your thoughts on that? Like, do you think there needs to be a connection, or is it like a separate thing that you're doing for fulfillment?
I would say like sort of again, some people do take passion from their careers and what they do, like they're fulfilled by their careers,
Hmm.
and they sort of take that fulfillment into the rest of their lives. And some people, they just have a career basically to fuel their fulfillment of doing other things.
Hmm.
Like if they wanted to, say, for example, make sort of like independent movies, for example, it's generally by and large like beyond an average budget to do that. But if you sort of like again just sort of like stash away some money, you're going to be able to hire like somebody who can run a camera, somebody who can do maybe makeup, somebody do lighting, etc., and so forth.
Hmm.
Like even I'll go back to comic books on this. Like pretty much every writer and artist that I know,
Yeah.
like they by and large they were doing like basically some other job for 40, 50 hours a week, and then they sort of like basically to all right, keep the lights on, keep food in my belly while I write these 18 scripts or work on these like 25 pages a month to try and mail out to Marvel, or just sort of like working for like I don't know, 80, 90 bucks a page, so
Hmm.
so I'd say it's preferable if a passion does come from a thing you are paid to do 40 to 50 hours a week.
Hmm.
It does not necessarily need to be the case.
Right. And a follow-up to that, then,
Mhm.
if for some reason, right, like, I don't know, maybe your podcast, right, like it blows up so much and you end up getting like a substantial return, sponsors, all that stuff, to the point where you no longer have to worry about the money. Would you be
Mhm.
willing on like quitting your job and stuff for that, or do you think you would still want to pursue the separate side of the two things?
I would say I'd still like to I like the field that I'm in. For all
Okay,
intents and purposes, like it's not
there you
like
go.
I
Yeah.
definitely lean a little bit more towards the former camp of I do take some passion from my job. Like
Yeah.
I do by and large enjoy my job. I'd
Yeah.
say it's sort of like I believe it's important work. I do believe it's a thing I enjoy, and also just sort of I would I also in terms of like massive decisions,
Yeah.
I tend to lean a bit more towards inertia, like a bit more towards status quo.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
bit like now, like basically even if it was just sort of like I mean, maybe if it's like a Joe Rogan $100 million Spotify deal, then I'm just
Yeah.
like, yeah, I could probably quit my job. But if it's just sort of like, all right, you could be making a corresponding amount of money
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Equal
doing
one.
podcasting,
Hmm.
that would sort of just be a little bit like, what if I can't think of a thing? How long is this gonna last?
So
This is
is
going
the
to be as good as many listeners as I have.
right? So the fear really there would be in regards to like this is something I'm passionate about. I'm enjoying doing it, and there is a chance that eventually that's gonna stop. And when that stops, I still do care about my job and the stuff that.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. I like the way you're looking at that. That's I think that's very different than the other people that I talk to about this kinds of stuff. So it seems more sensible.
I'd say, and also kind of, there is a freedom to me of not really being like beholden
Yeah,
to. I would say again, I say this as somebody with no sponsors. There's like not necessarily having like being able to do whatever changes I want
yeah.
and just whatever topics I want without the worry of oh Jesus, I'm gonna lose this ND mattress sponsorship.
Oh, right. Hmm.
I would say they don't sponsor this, do they?
No, I got no sponsors, dude. We're good. In fact, even if I could, I probably would hold off for the longest time, so don't worry
But yeah,
about
no, I think, but just for a lot of it, like I would say, just like for example, for my third season, I'd say like the Napoleon's penis Valentine's Day special probably would not have gone over super well
it.
if I need to run it by like pretty much anyone who's paying me money.
Yeah, yeah,
And if I want to sort of like again sort of expand the talk show thing that like sort of like the talk show spin-off of what explain that I'm doing now, which
yeah.
I also very much need to get you on. But yeah, it's also what will
Absolutely.
you explain? Because for all intents and purposes, I will get somebody else to do my job. God damn it! You bring your facts this time.
I'm ready for that. I've already set up, so
Excellent.
anytime you want, I'm down.
I was just gonna say I would say I am salty in. But yeah, no, I sort of like being able to sort of have this be like basically an interesting hobby that I'm doing. Like if there's more, like if there is some financial remuneration, if there is some sort of thing for it, great. I enjoy it being a hobby. I do not know that I would be quite as okay with it if it became like a second job.
Yeah, no, I got you. I got you. That makes a lot of sense. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And I like it because you know the exact reason that you're enjoying it. You know what you're getting out of it, and that's why you're willing on pursuing it to the extent that you are, right? Because it's still a lot of work, even from what you're making it sound like. Like that's
Oh god, yeah, no, it's pretty much in every episode about 20 goes into it. Like
mm,
basically between the research, recording, etc. and so forth. I'd say yeah, and I'd say probably on Craig's end, probably a few hours as well. Yeah, basically for every minute, call it an hour.
yeah, yeah. But an
Mhm.
invaluable hour, right? For every minute. It's just like you
Yep,
learn so
I'm. Oh
much.
God, I have learned so many things through this podcast. So many.
All right.
Mm.
Well, no, that's awesome. All right, well, we're gonna flip the switch a little bit here. So, a lot of that stuff was like on career and hobbies, but I kind of also wanted to talk to you about relationships because I know the other big challenge with things like moving is like maintaining your friendships and other types of relationships. And I just wanted your thoughts on that because I know, again, I think this is something that's similar between you and me, is we've done a really good job of maintaining relations with the people that meant something big to us at the start of our like elementary school. Like we've been friends since then, right? So I just wanted your thoughts on like how you view relationships and friendships and all that other good jazz.
Ooh, all right.
Do you want a
Um,
more specific question? Sorry, I know that's a lot.
no, no, no. I'll try and give as much of an answer as I can. Feel free
Sure,
to drill in as you need.
sounds
Using
good.
I would say using your very authoritative interview glasses and interviewer background.
Dude, they're tilted, but got it.
That's authoritative enough. It's authoritative enough. You're fine.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Just again, I would say the audio audience didn't know until you said it.
Whoopsie
Oh darn
daisies.
it! Whatever. It's Nixon and Kennedy all over again.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. I will
Uh,
point out my own
the
flaws.
I would say the radio audience thought Nixon won, but the video audience thought Kennedy did.
Wait, is this an actual
Oh,
thing?
that's
Like
the
that?
president.
I don't remember this. Okay, cool.
Well, it was it was literally almost definitely maybe before your parents were born.
Fair enough.
Possibly. Definitely before you were. Definitely
Yes,
before you were, you young
yes.
whippersnapper, you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
thank you.
Jesus, what was the question again?
Okay, let's start with friendships. Maintaining
Relationships.
friendships. Yes,
Relationships.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes, I am. Again, I'm incredibly bad for going off of tangents.
Dude, this is a conversation. That's the purpose. It's supposed to be as raw as possible. We're good. Vomit out as many words as you need to. We're good.
Um, it does for me. I find sort of like maintaining relationships, like with a lot of people, like in Calgary or just out west in general.
Mhm,
It does take a lot more of a conscious effort. Take the time to text, check in, because you can't necessarily pop over to somebody's house and just like, hey, how's it going? Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Knock knock. Hi neighbor, here's a plate of cupcakes. I would say you sort of do need to sort of take the time to communicate. Like sort of communicate, not necessarily schedule hangouts per se, because again, a lot of my friends, I say to my friend who has created an interview show, tend to be like sort of aggressive introverts. So, like a lot of them, I'll just sort of have an idea of, okay, they are not going to pick up a phone if they call. They don't like that. So it's just sort of like, all right, we text. And
mhm,
sort of just after a while, you sort of get the rhythms of sort of like the people that you want to stay friends with. I'd say occasionally you find some way of hanging out, whether that's sort of like Discord.
mhm.
I'd say Discord, Skype, phone call while you're house cleaning or something. Really, just the advent of high-speed internet has been very good for me being able to maintain relationships.
Right.
Yeah. Because for all intents and purposes, 98% of the year to people sort of in Calgary and out west, I'm on text message on a phone. I would
That
say, and again, that's sort of like, that's sort of the thing of it. I've made friends out here as well, but sort of a long distance sort of friendship or relationship of any sort, really. It does involve, shall we say, more like active maintenance and active participation than, just like somebody who just like, yeah, we hang out with because we sort of like live in the same area, went to the same school, do some of the same things, etc., and so forth.
mhm.
Because without sort of like, I keep on saying active maintenance, but sort of without that, it's very easy to sort of just like,
I love how you consciously caught yourself doing that. I've never seen someone do
I
that.
have a lot of vocal tics that I'm now just realizing. I'll hold a phrase and beat it to the ground.
Okay, so I guess my two questions for that is like because when I hear something like that in my head, it's like in a way that automatically weeds out friends that you wouldn't want to maintain a relationship with. Like just like you figure it out pretty quickly, right? Like, oh, it was more superficial than I thought or something like that.
Yeah.
But do you find like when you come back to Calgary, there's certain people that, even though you didn't they're not good at maintaining like a long distance friendship, you still like fit back like a glove with or something because there wasn't like or does that not really play in as much?
I would say I would say to an extent, yes. Like, 'cause I definitely have friends that are not like great with maintaining a text conversation,
Yeah,
but like
hello.
will play video games. I was just gonna say, yeah. Sometimes I'll just wait for a month to hear back from Taver. Like, this is probably the longest extended conversation we've had in 5 years. We needed to be on a podcast.
Ah, come on, I called you the other week.
All right, the second longest
There you go.
conversation we've had. But yeah, no, I'd say that's doable. But like again, as a millennial,
Mhm,
again, you may not. Actually, you're probably going to be able to tell because of my voice. But yeah, just as a millennial, a lot more of us are kind of more comfortable via text. But
right.
I definitely do have some friends, some family that just like they don't text a huge amount.
Mhm.
But yeah, just sort of like, yeah, I would say we hang out. We sort of have some form of contact enough that it's like, yeah, I'm in town for a week. Do you want to grab some coffee? Do you want to hit a video arcade? Want to go rafting on a river? Etc. and so forth.
Love it. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And besides that, is there any other criteria you would use to like weed out toxic relationships or toxic friendships?
Um,
You giggle. All
um,
right.
no, I apologize.
Don't apologize. It's all good. I love it. That was so genuine. It was beautiful.
I yeah, I also laugh a bit like a maniac. It's
Made me think of the Lion King. You're fine.
oh god, I'm the hyena. I'm
Oh,
Whoopi Goldberg. I'm Whoopi Goldberg.
she did a good job. Okay, that's all there is to it.
There.
I'm sorry. That did not mean to be insulting.
No, 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 toxic. No, no, no. To be clear, Whoopi Goldberg, I would say, very talented actress, very talented comedian, solid part of the View. I think. I think she's on the View. Anyways, so toxic relationships. Um, for me, again, um, a lot of it for me tends to be like not necessarily like a gut check per se, but
Yeah.
it's like, are you conscious, or at least do you have sort of a instinct that you are giving far more in this relationship
Okay.
than you are receiving? Like, admittedly, like sometimes people are in sort of like a bad situation and just sort of need that, or they can't necessarily have that. But if it becomes a consistent habit, is sort of again for a significant portion of it, I'm 2,800 kilometers away from most of my toxic sort of like friendships, relationships. I'm sort of like, yeah, I can let that drop. That happens. But yeah, for me, it's just sort of if somebody becomes either draining to be around. I would say that's not a great way how to phrase it, but like basically for all intents and purposes, if you are feeling like all you're doing is giving in a relationship and not really receiving anything in particular, or like you feel like you're being taken advantage of, like basically if you can do a thing and they need that thing and you feel like that's kind of all you're there for,
Yeah, yeah.
like that to me is just like,
No,
yeah,
no.
this isn't the thing I'm interested in continuing.
I get what you're saying. So it's like, like we all have limited amount of energy and time in our lives,
Yeah.
and we choose to spend it with the people that we love. But I mean love in a like a liberal sense, like
I
everyone,
understand.
right? Like the people we care about. And I guess what you're saying is if that energy is being drained and not being returned, right? Because that's how you feel
Yeah.
yourself also being lifted up, right?
Hmm. Yeah, like I mean, admittedly, I've also had sort of toxic relationships in the past, and again, it sometimes does take years, months to realize just, oh, yeah, I'm absolutely exhausted when I'm around after I'm around this person. Like
Sorry,
I
I shouldn't giggle at that. That's horrible, but
no, please, no, please. I was like, yeah, and sometimes you just sort of just have that thought of just like, yeah, this is just like that low energy sort of just like, yeah, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just not feeling well. Maybe I'm just sort of like, maybe it's just shitty weather. Maybe it's just like the 6 months of winter. Je ne sais pas, but it's just sort of, yeah. And sometimes it's just sort of like, just when you just sort of have that realization of, oh, this is bad for me.
yeah.
This is, mhm,
Sorry, you know what? And I kind of equate to that to things like, weight gain or to burnout or to things like that, which is like, especially with, sorry, this is a little more directed towards you, but especially with like such a busy lifestyle that you have that we've already identified, right? I think it's hard to take a moment to just be, take a moment and see like, oh, this is where I've come to, right? Just in regards to like for me, for example, right? Like I also try to keep myself quite busy and focus on
mhm.
other people and stuff. And so like last year I put on quite a bit of weight and I didn't really notice it until it was at like a substantial number. And it wasn't until a moment which was like, holy shit, this flight of stairs,
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
did
the whole
not feel
thing.
this long.
No, you start realizing it's like, oh, around step 13, 14. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, maybe I should be running on that treadmill just a little bit more, or even
Oh,
at all. Turn it on and wipe the dust off. Anyways, that's not the point. No, but like I think it's exactly that. It's like, there's so many things that go on in our lives that you get comfortable with it, even though it's not normal or it's not supposed to
mhm.
be that. And I think that's what you're trying to say, right? Like you can't really
Yeah.
see it in the moment. But do you think there are certain things that like, if you go through multiple things like that or multiple situations which make you question like is this really good for me, do you
Mhm.
find that you have practices now that are like a little better in figuring out like this is kind of bad for me and so on and so forth, or is that still very difficult to identify?
It's a, it is a work in progress for me at any rate. Like
Hmm.
I, hmm, I say I apologize for sort of like the long pauses. I'm just trying to figure out.
Dude, I
I
love them, don't
tend
worry about it.
to I tend to have a little bit more of a default towards active service, like sort of like in like the love languages sense.
Hmm.
I tend to lean a lot more towards the like acts of service, which genuinely a lot sometimes turns into, yeah, no, I was to say, yeah, no, you were right. Ended up just sort of like, yeah, take out the garbage, walk the dog, clean the cat litter, etc., and so forth. And sometimes there have been relationships in the past where that just turned into the norm. Like, I did all the things.
Hmm.
Wasn't necessarily like, I'd say, and again, I'm I'd honestly probably say I almost like that's one of the things I'm a little more hyper vigilant about is just sort of like, am I falling back into that? Am I just doing all the things now? Like, am I
Hmm.
putting in 100% of the effort combined in this relationship. So
Interesting.
again, I might sort of lean a bit more towards the hyper vigilant sort of thing in that regard. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's probably not super healthy, but sort of like trying to find a bit of a balance for that.
Right.
Again, sort of like if you go through like a bad toxic relationship, you
Mm-hmm.
again, I can't speak for everyone, but I sort of leaned a little bit more towards all right, tower, guards up, spears out. Just basically every time I see something of that behavior even show up, even just sort of like, yeah, no, I'm not really feeling that great. Would you be able to take the dog out? There's just that small little voice, just like it's happening again. It's happening again. It's like, no, no, that's crazy talk. You're fine.
Mm. And you know what? I know you're saying that's probably unhealthy, but I think that that's a good first step for anyone that in regards to that,
Mhm.
right? Because like first figuring it out for yourself, and then I know it sounds like it's too an extreme, but then figuring out like closing the boundary closer and closer and closer, right? Like, and I think anyone does it. Like even shit, I'm going back to weight gain, right? You can't
Good
just suddenly start running
point.
a marathon again. You gotta like slowly walk first, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Or, you might decide to dance or something, or is it something a little bit different? But there's definitely those boundaries need to be there and just adjusted throughout, right? So it's to me, you're saying that's unhealthy. I feel like that's like the first step towards a very healthy adjustment.
No, that's a fair point and probably a better way of phrasing it. But yeah, just sort of like the like if I immediately went to assume that like this sort of like innocent like yeah no I'm just not feeling great after work. Would you mind doing this thing?
Hmm.
Is just this if I went with that first assumption of it's all happening again.
Um,
That would be a bad assumption to continue on. But like
yeah,
just sort of having a bit of that nascent like okay if this continues on for a prolonged period of time, there's a discussion that needs sort of like there's a
right.
conversation that needs to be had. Like, hey, I'm feeling a little bit more. I'm feeling sort of like I'm doing a lot of stuff or like stuff around the house.
Hmm.
I feel like I might need some help. Would you be able to, et cetera and so forth.
Hmm. And
Then
you're,
again, that might again that could be just like the same with friendships or any other relationships. Like, hey, I feel like I'm giving a lot of this.
yeah,
And by and large, if somebody says, "Are we allowed to swear on this?"
yeah, go for it.
All right, fair enough. If like if basically somebody says, "Well, go fuck yourself, you're wrong,"
Uh-huh.
and cuts off all contact, odds are you're pretty well shot of them.
So true, yes. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. And you know what? I think that's the hardest thing in friendships or relationships. It is that communication thing. I feel like people struggle to just say what's on their mind. It like eventually either like blows up or it never gets addressed and you start like resending yourself from things. So what you're talking about, to me, it's the most difficult thing. Talking to Sammy and Megan, they make it sound so goddamn simple. It's scary, but like,
Ah, those absolutely perfect people.
yeah, yeah.
They're absolute delight. Absolute delight.
No, but like, because I think that's the thing. Because like, even with communication, right? People have in my head different levels of it that they're comfortable with. Like, I could send a text message, to a friend of mine, right? And I would understand that, they might not respond for a month. And I'm okay with that because that's, we've talked about it, all that other stuff. But I could also send a text message to another friend, and I know if they're not responding within half an hour, there's something seriously going on, right? Like, and it's about understanding that, and also understanding some people, like if I'm sending them a text message. Sorry, I'm going to text messages for all this, which is weird, but I think that's like a very
Messages and
simplified way.
waiting. It's all good. Continue.
Yeah, there's like some people where if I send a text message and I'm not careful in how I'm phrasing something, right?
Mhm.
They're gonna overthink the hell out of what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. And
Mhm.
then there's other people that I could say something and I'm expecting a very specific response, but they won't even think twice about it or like how they're responding because it is exactly that. It's a text message to them, and there's like I'm using that as an example because it's like a communication barrier is
Oh,
automatically created with
absolutely,
the text.
absolutely.
So, yeah, that's why I think like communication, it's like so important, but it's hard to do. Sorry, going back to what we were talking about, that was my side rant. So the first part, so I guess toxic relationships. So the first part is like introspective, right? So you've brought it in like introspectively. Do you think like what are some of the other steps you think that people can take to identify that stuff and try and like
Oh
that's
God. I mean, I will say I'm also just put it for all intents and purposes. I'll put it as I am not a mental health or relationship
oh,
professional.
of course,
I
just getting
am not.
thoughts.
I'd say that's sort of like that's not my level of expertise.
Yeah.
But hmm,
I'm sorry. I want to make sure everyone knows this. These are just our thoughts as people
yeah.
having a talk, nothing
No,
else.
no, no. Actually, it's sort of. Sorry. Again, that's part of my professional background of know what things you're an expert on, know what things you're not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, hmm. I'd say again, sort of like in terms of things to keep an eye on for like toxic relationships,
For
friendships.
you
Really,
personally, Brendan?
for me personally, um, hmm, I'd say probably isolation, a feeling of isolation, like a lot of just like sort of like whether or not like yeah, no, sometimes you just don't feel it, or just like all right, I'm doing sort of, I feel like I'm sort of alone in this. Like a consistent feeling of sort of being alone, despite the fact that, that's also sort of like it's not really a partnership. Like if it ever becomes like sort of like, it's not really sort of like a partnership anymore. Like, not pretty much everyone's going to be able to give exactly 50% of everything to each other. That's not how people work. But if it stops feeling like a partnership, that's a bad sign.
Okay, no, isolation and then figuring out that those two things don't match together. But in regards to it, like after you like go through something like that, like a toxic relationship, toxic I'm even gonna just say friendship, right? Like uh do you think like so one of the things that you've done clearly is you've thought about it introspectively, right? Like after the fact. And then that creates some sort of like measures that, oh, this is not going to happen again because I've thought about it introspectively. But is there any other measures that you've put up? And sorry, that was the question I meant to
Gotcha. Okay.
ask. Like for you personally, again, that's why like, we're not mental health and stuff, but like, is there any other
No,
thing
you're
that you
right.
would
My
recommend?
apologies. I misunderstood.
No, no,
Um,
all good. I phrased that
Other
poorly.
measures that I'd put up, I'd probably lean a little bit more towards like, oh god, yeah. I was just saying this is also another long pause question because now I'm just like, what have I done? Because again, it's not necessarily for me. It wasn't necessarily a thing I consciously put up.
Mhm.
It's just for all intents and purposes, like this is just how my brain works after this experience.
Right.
Like that's just sort of how my brain works, and I'm just sort of trying to maintain the good things and remove the bad things. Like a lot of the things is just I have sort of like a nascent desire to try and help people. Like try again to sort of like try and help people out, and just sort of like just like when you're first getting to know somebody, injure yourself to help them out. Like
Mm.
don't do harm to yourself to try and help somebody out.
Okay. And so
For lack of again,
yeah.
that's more of my just like, all right, hold off, see what happens. But a lot of it's just sort of like, does this seem necessarily like I would be hurting myself to
Okay.
help out this other person?
Mm. No, that makes sense. So like figuring out like the boundaries and stuff that are there. To be honest, I was talking to another friend recently, and they came out of what was a manipulative
Mm-hmm.
relationship or a manipulative situation. And
Mm-hmm.
for them, the difficulty was um, figuring out that they were actually being manipulated, right? And even though they saw the signs multiple times over, they chose to ignore it because, of course, like, they cared so much about the person, right? And I think there's a certain this is gonna sound horrible, but there's a certain beauty of that as well because it speaks to a person's heart, right? Like, you care so much about someone else and you're putting your heart out there, and that vulnerability. And in a way, I think it's beautiful because it's like, just willing on putting yourself out there. It's painful when when it ends up being like, a little sad,
Mm,
but mhm,
I think this one I might have to respectfully disagree with you on, Dower.
absolutely sounds good.
No, I was going to say, and I mean, again, I say this from, again, still, I would say, again, it's still, well, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, the manipulator generally tends to know this is happening.
Mm,
Like I say, tends to happening. This is an active, conscious thing that they're doing.
right. Mm.
I'd say, I mean, good on the person for trying to look past it, but it's still
Oh,
a
sorry.
form.
To be
Mm,
clear, they should certainly end it. It just, I think the
yeah,
challenge in figuring out that they're being manipulated, right?
yeah,
Um, I don't think they should lose that part of themselves where it's
mm,
like, there was love expressed to that extent. That's what
mm,
made it a challenge. But I feel like that's what happens as we get older, as we get more and more guarded. And I think it's reasonable. It's so
yeah.
reasonable. So reasonable.
Yeah, and I mean, like, probably the thing for me was just to try not to get callous enough to just, like, shut myself off from
Mm,
everything forever. Because
yeah.
the temptation's there. My God, is the
Yeah.
temptation
And
there.
honestly, it sounds like the easiest solution to any of that stuff,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's best way to not feel bad things is to just not feel much of anything at all.
Yeah. No, but I love the fact that you haven't lost any part of yourself, at least with your friends,
Mm,
right? So that's
mm,
and gotta respect that. Okay, so my other question to you, is in regards to just in regards to making new friends, right? Because like, sorry, I'm relating this back to Ottawa again because I feel like that's like
absolutely.
such a big thing.
Absolutely.
But did you find any difficulties in like finding new people and making new friends? Because as someone that's lived in Calgary his whole life, I still find it challenging to meet new people and make new connections. Sorry, this is like a 180 from what we were just talking
Oh,
about.
no, 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 please, absolutely. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Uh, for me, it tended to be because a lot of my friends, at least for the first four-ish years I was here,
Mhm.
they were primarily people that moved out here, like with me from school, like who are also in the master's program and also got jobs in Ottawa,
Yeah.
and people I met either through work or one degree of separation through work. So for a lot of that, it tended to be like, okay, I wasn't meeting a huge amount of people because basically at the time I basically was trying to run back home to try and take care of my partner who moved out with, or at least my ex-wife now, who
Right.
moved out to Calgary with, who moved out from Calgary with me, and sort of the move never quite really agreed with her. So
Mm.
there are sort of situations where I sort of had to run back home to sort of take care of her, and basically that sort of also limited the limited the amount of like external friend finding that I could really do.
Yeah, that sounds
But yeah, no,
exhausting
sort
going
of,
back and forth, right? So yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense.
I'd say yeah, and again, it's just sort of like in terms of like basically using the spoon theory, just like okay, you only have so many spoons you can use in a given day.
Yeah.
Most of my spoons were pretty much work and trying to take care of my ex-wife.
Right.
Now my now ex-wife.
Mm.
She was my fiance and then my wife initially for the time, and then ex-wife, etc. and so forth.
Right.
Yes,
Hmm.
as that tends to go. As that
Yes.
tends to go.
It's part of life.
Yeah, no, 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 absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, no, I'd say kind of after the separation happened, I was sort of able. All of a sudden, I had a lot more time on my hands, and I was sort of able to extend out a little bit more and just like, hey, I can join a rec volleyball league. Hey, I can join a board game club. Hey, I can actually run a Dungeons and Dragons thing, etc. and so forth. So yeah, like you have, I'd say you don't I mean, moving to a different city, you don't necessarily have the yeah. No, I can always like have my high school slash junior high school slash whomever like people you grew up with.
Hmm.
So you kind of need to again make a bit more of that active effort to put yourself out there, do some things, I'd say like do some things you're interested in. Ideally, you find people you like who enjoy those common activities as well.
You
And there's
answered
like
the
great.
follow-up question. I was literally
No,
writing
no,
that down.
no, please, by all means, read your mind. You are welcome.
Yeah, so I call you Mr. B.
Oh.
Sorry, continue.
But yeah, no, I'd say it's considerably more difficult to sort of like make friends as an adult in a new city.
Hmm.
But also Ottawa tends to have a lot of people in a similar boat
Hmm.
because like a lot of people move here for to work for the government of Canada.
Yeah.
And like a lot of that tends to be just from various other points in Canada, or they just come in for a tech job, et cetera, and so forth. So you have a lot of people that are just like, yeah, I moved here like 2 years ago, don't know a lot of people. All right, let's grab a beer, let's hang out, something like that. Let's play some pool. Let's run a one shot. Let's talk about Warhammer 40K. Maybe some of those things might be a little more specific to me and my interests, but
No, that's what we're here to hear about. So it's all good, Mr. B. No, but
yeah, no.
that's kind of cool. So do you find that Ottawa, because of what you just said, like, is it more inviting than like, say, Calgary, the in regards to like, meeting people and stuff, or do you think it's just like just try and get yourself out there and like try
I
to?
think it's more like try and get yourself out there. I
Okay.
won't lie to you. Like
Mm.
that's I'd say as a baseline, people in Calgary tend to be nicer. But I'm also saying this as a cishet white guy.
I love how you keep bringing that up.
It's just sort of like it hasn't been an issue for me.
No.
But yeah, no, it's like just by and like yes, for all intents and purposes, it's just sort of like people in Calgary have been like just by and large just like they're sort of like that sort of like the Western hospitality a little bit,
Yeah.
and people in Ottawa are a little bit more
Hmm.
reserved. But like again, pretty much once you get to know people with a common interest, great, it's lovely,
Yeah. No,
lovely, welcome.
that's fair. And honestly, again, that speaks volumes to like literally everything else you talked about, right? Like, going back to the hat metaphor, you're like willing on changing your hats and trying new things and meeting new people
Oh,
and all that
absolutely.
stuff.
Let's put this hat down. Let's put this hat down for a little bit. Put on a new volleyball playing hat, etc., and so forth.
Did you start volleyball? Like that was that actually a thing?
Oh no, this
Uh,
was. Oh no, this was a. Yeah, no, I would say I played volleyball. I almost got a ball spiked off my head.
oh,
It's been a time. It's been a time. I
is it
have had
a
sports-related injuries for the first time in over a decade.
oh wow, is it indoors or like
You know, it's absolutely indoors. It
indoors?
is. Today was the only day that's been above zero in Ottawa for a while.
Oh jeez.
There is no outdoor volleyball right now.
Why did you choose volleyball? Like
Well, I got asked to join a team actually. Like just like one of my friends was just sort of like, "Hey, we need at least 6 people for this indoor volleyball
oh,
team."
I thought you were gonna say cis white guys.
Yeah, just like he's tall, and I was pretty straightforward and just like, I'm not I've not really played volleyball outside of gym,
Yeah,
like gym classes, and just like,
right.
oh yeah, that's fine. You're tall. You'll be okay.
You'll be tall. You're okay. I'm never gonna get that compliment, but that's awesome.
Yet. I would say yet. I would just say start wearing those 7-inch platform gym shoes to ever.
But then I won't look like a hobbit anymore, and that's an issue.
Hold on, are we pro or anti? Is this a pro or anti Hobbit
I'm
podcast?
always pro habits.
No,
Little
fair
people
enough. Fair
rule.
enough. I gotcha.
Dude,
I
I'm the
gotcha.
size of the average Canadian girl, and I'm proud of it. So,
There we go. I would say I think that's the line of the pot. I think that's the line of the episode. That right there.
yeah, no, I'm gonna start putting that in the description of every single podcast session that I do.
Hi, Zach Kamani, podcast host, size of the average Canadian girl.
Yeah.
Pleasure meeting you.
So, if you don't mind me asking, I'm gonna
Yeah.
180 a little bit again. Just out of curiosity, has your criteria for what you're looking for in a partner changed significantly, or is it fairly similar still?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Again, I put a lot more of an emphasis sort of on. I would like it to be a partnership. Like kind of gone the way of it being somebody I sort of take care of,
Hmm.
like as the man, the breadwinner, etc. No, that's I would I'd like it to be a partnership. Like for
Okay.
all intents and purposes,
Hmm.
I like I did not really necessarily want to do anything,
Yeah.
like do everything, but like that was also sort of like, oh, that jumps up a criteria a little bit. And also just sort of somebody who saw me as a part of their life, like as an additive to my life, but additive to their life, but like was a complete person, like aside from me. Like
Mm.
that, just like for I'm not describing it well, but just like has their own interests, does their own thing, their own hobbies, their own career, etc. and so forth. Like they were like that, like they were like that before me, etc. and so forth. Like
Like
that.
they didn't evolve in the relationship to like make something. It wasn't a us. It didn't feel like a us to you, right? Is that's what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For all intents and purposes, that
Yeah.
was sort of the thing of it. Yeah.
Just
But
wanted
yeah,
to
no.
interject to help out a little bit because you said I'm not phrasing it
Yeah,
properly, but
no,
I
absolutely.
think I got what you're saying.
Please, I'd say that's a sign of a good interviewer. Summarize. My God, summarize me.
All right. Okay, so in regards to that though, is there like what else do you normally look for like in a partner? Is there other things that are like do you normally like similar interests? You said you would prefer someone with similar interests.
I
Uh,
mean, it helps to have some commonality.
right.
Otherwise, what do you talk about? What do you do? Like, there are definitely people, like, I know who have had relationships that's like, they don't have a lot in common, but
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, they both like the mountains. So they go hiking every weekend, etc. and so forth, and just sort of acknowledge that, all right, one of them's watching, I would say, again, one of them watching Bridgerton and the others sort of painting Dungeons and Dragons minis. Sometimes,
That sounded very real. Just
no, no, no. I don't have miniature paint yet.
yes. All right. The desire. Okay, I'm seeing your future.
Yes, I was just gonna say, in time, in time. But yeah, no. Some commonality is good, but like again, it doesn't necessarily need to be like everything identical the same.
Okay. And would you prefer someone with like uh, like your career is also kind of unique, and you were talking about for your career, you like the idea of helping people in the macro sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
are you looking for someone that also likes helping people, and it potentially is like is does it need to be correlated with their career, or does it just need to be a desire of like helping people?
I think just sort of like a desire to help people. That's more of it than anything. Like just sort of like would like to would like to help people, would not necessarily is not necessarily jaded enough to think that yeah, it's a stupid idea to try and like
Try to
help
help
people.
people.
To try
Yeah,
and help
that's fair.
people to sort of like put a significant amount of effort into trying to make the world better, et cetera, and so forth.
Yeah,
And
yeah. No, that makes
I would
sense.
like somebody who would, at the very least, not think that would be an that would not think that would be an incredibly stupid idea.
Yes, yes. And you know what's funny is everyone that I've talked to, even the people that seem to have the most crude lifestyles, which obviously you're not, but I've definitely talked to people that have like, I've been told by someone once before to taste the rainbow before you settle down. But it feels like so far the people that I've talked to taste the. Do you want me to explain that? Because it's kind of gross.
It took me a second. It took me a second to
Okay.
understand what you were using the skill slogan for. Just, oh,
Yeah. I've had a lot of these talks now. It's
with your genitals. Okay, continue.
pardon? Yeah,
Continue.
I think we've talked more about penises than I have in any other conversation. Like, so that's like okay. I love it.
Oh,
Okay.
I cracked myself up with
No,
that. I'm sorry.
no, it was freaking hilarious. Yeah, but one of the commonalities I'm finding is that I think everyone seems to have this idea of like they want to settle down. Now, the having kids or not having kids, and people all have like debates on that in regards to that. But I guess. I don't know. I'm starting to see like how important it is to like find a partner you can actually like grow with and stuff. And I think that's what you seem to be looking for as well, right? It's just like this idea of like someone that can support you and you're supporting them to like grow to a better place together. And that seems to be what was lacking, right? So is there anything else that you think you look for? Like I know like some people have lists, other people don't, and so on and so forth. Are you the kind of person with a list, or is it just like
No, Christ, no. There's no checklist list.
no list? Okay.
Yeah, no. For all intents and purposes, when I'd say a lot of it just sort of like when you know, you know. Like it's sort of yeah, sort of
Okay.
a bit of a. I don't have a huge like descriptor of it. It's sort of like yeah, just when you know, you know. I'd say sort of like by and large, I say I say as somebody who can represent one person. That's sort of like again. That's sort of like yeah, you know, when you know, you know.
When you know, and that's a very simple way of looking at it. I love
Yeah,
it. It's like
but
you're
there's no like checklist of must be somewhere between 5'6", 5'9", brunette.
must be
Green eyes. No,
and nothing creepy
there's
like she must.
a scroll. There's not a scroll.
Yes, that's only for D&D.
Exactly.
Have you
A
actually
monster
ever
for
done?
Dungeons and Dragons only. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes.
Important things. Dungeons and
I,
Dragons.
I feel like the what was it, Department of National Defense? That's what you were saying,
Mhm.
is that? Yeah, I feel like they
Yeah.
might have a scroll somewhere. You never know.
Oh, if they do, it's definitely somewhere in a lock and key, somewhere buried in a vault.
Fair enough.
Or just burned somewhere if it's too confidential. It's a
That's
thing.
fair.
Don't worry
That's
about it.
fair.
It's fine.
Okay, and then I only got like I think we've covered like a little bit of everything. Thank you again, Mr. B, for doing that. But I just wanted to ask you one more thing. This is something that I literally ask everyone in one way or another. But
Okay.
I guess my question, I'm gonna phrase it a little differently for you though. I hope that's okay. Just in
Yeah.
regards to happiness and what you would deem a happy life, right? Um,
Mhm.
I guess my question to you is right now, do you feel like you are getting towards whatever you would deem a happy life to be? And what do you deem to be a happy life to be?
Um, I like the phrasing of that question, and it's sort of an interesting one because kind of the first 3, 4 years that like that I was here,
Hmm.
like sort of with my now ex-wife, I'd sort of like whenever somebody mentioned just offhand, I was like, yeah, I bet you're pretty happy, and just sort of like there's that mental thought of I don't think I am. Like I don't think so.
Hmm.
And just after a while, you just sort of forget a little bit what happy is. Like again, you sort of like have that definition of it. You just sort of forget it after a while. It's like I'm content. I've got a roof over my head. I've got a job that pays me. It's okay. I can get through.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think I'm starting to lean a little bit more, like considerably more towards happy. Like I think leaning a lot more towards that, absolutely for sure. But
Okay.
sort of like what's leading a happy life? Try to for all intents and purposes, try and do something that brings you joy. Whether that's your work, it doesn't have to be your work, but just find something that brings you joy. I'd
Hmm.
say like just I would say, and if you can find that person, place, thing, make it a significant part of your life, even if that does involve like some work to make that happen.
Yeah.
I would say that is sort of an element of living a happy life.
Yeah.
To me, anyways. To me, anyways.
Yeah. That
Yeah. Mhm.
honestly, that sounds beautiful. It does. It really, really does, and I'm happy to hear that, and I think I agree with that. I think that's what people should do if they figured out like what makes them joyful or smile or
Mhm.
something like that. Then yeah, more effort should be put two words that, even if it's scary, right? Because I think that's one of the
Yeah, that's what
limiting
I'm saying.
factors.
Sometimes especially if it's scary, because again, as somebody who's an introvert who's very much like staying in the house, if I would say if I'd done that, I wouldn't have had some of the friendships, relationships that I have today that I prize very well. Sometimes the scary thing is the necessary thing, or maybe the thing that gets a good, like the best reward out of it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I love
this
that,
is
and it's like be
rewarding in the
open.
long term.
Exactly, exactly. Just be open-minded, right? You never know. You never know what life's. Oh, I was about to quote Forrest Gump there. What life's chocolates will give you.
Exactly. Sometimes it's pralines.
You sounded so disappointed. Do you not like pralines?
They are not a thing I seek out. They
Ah,
are not a
okay.
thing I seek out, shall we say.
I'm
See,
more.
I'm good with a praline. I am good with an expected praline. I am not good with an unexpected praline.
I need to bring you on for a chocolate conversation.
Oh,
Just
is that
kidding.
what we're doing? Is this not like the last 30 minutes of this? Is just
Oh,
we're dunking on we're just dunking on various. I'll just say one of us gets a quality street, we'll bring out the other one, and just the other rips on it.
I'm actually
Just
down to do that.
bring
I'm not
it
gonna
up.
lie. Actually, I got a question for you. Sorry, this is a little off topic given how deep we just went, and I apologize for this. But
I'm nothing but off topic. Ask around.
what's your favorite kind of iced tea? Because I'm a big iced tea lover. I know you are too. I want to know what the difference is.
Well,
Uh,
I mean, a lot of it really depends on whether or not you're talking your American tea, which is sort of like just basically as much sugar as you can stuff in it, or, sort of like your more international iced tea, which is literally just tea leaves, initially hot, then cool.
right.
I would say if we're talking like you're just like toss a powder in or just like put an aggressive amount of sweetness in it,
Yeah, yeah.
you know what? I'd say I like a Lipton iced tea. I'd say I
Lipton.
like a Lipton iced tea. Like they
Oh.
have like those like 20 kilo. I'd say like sort of like those like 2 kilogram powder containers. I'd say honorable mention goes to Arizona iced tea because they've got about like 40 different flavors,
Yeah,
and even the fact they aren't technically sold for 99 cents anymore, at least
yeah.
not here. Still, it's still good. You can still get like one of those like 1 liter things for like 99 cents, or
Mm,
like a buck 50 or whatever it is now.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I'd say that's a decent. I'd say that's a decent like if I'm going through a wander through a convenience store. Yoink, thank you very much. But for that, I'd say the Lipton. If we're
Hmm.
talking, if we are to, wow, I can talk about iced tea for a
I
while.
figured you could. You're the one that got me addicted.
Yeah, yeah, I was just gonna say. But yeah, I'd say me personally, I tend to go a little bit more for like basically there like just a straight up just a straight up Earl Grey tea. I'd say again, you put it in cold,
Yeah.
you get some ice cubes, you toss some lemon juice in there. You do 1 cup of iced tea, about quarter cup of lemon juice, ice cubes, blend, stick a straw in.
I love it. Okay.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
so good.
I'm a big fan of the cool iced tea, like the
Mhm.
Cool brand. It's probably my favorite. It goes down so smoothly. Just
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about now.
yeah.
It took me a second to think. I was like, yeah, it's a cool brand iced tea. Yeah, that's the point of iced tea, David. It's all. Oh, yeah, no. Okay, yep. Just nope. I'm back on board. I'm back
Back
on
on
board.
board. All right, good.
All right, so we're
Yes.
going the other way around. I'm asking you a question
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Go for it.
What is your least favorite kind of iced tea?
Oh, geez, you really flipped the switch on that one. My goodness. Uh,
The interviewee is becoming the interviewer.
it's a conversation. All right, sure.
Uh,
I would say that my least favorite is probably pure leaf iced tea, like the Nestea Pure Leaf.
oh,
I know it's a little weird. It just tastes too much like tea for me, like real tea.
no, that's fair. So you're definitely more on the sweet side of the
Oh,
iced tea rather than
big
just.
time. Although
That's
I'm
fair.
although I drink like tea as well, but I prefer warmer teas than cold teas.
No,
So
absolutely,
for that,
absolutely. Sometimes if you, oh no, absolutely. Sometimes if you are getting sort of like something a little bit more ice, sometimes you just want a bunch of sugar in there.
Uh,
100%. I was
Yeah.
again 100% on board.
Yes, and that's why when I was walking up those stairs, suddenly, yeah.
I was just gonna say, and just beyond. Oh God, believe me, I would say the COVID-19 hit me as well. The COVID-19 pound increase hit
The
me as
COVID
well.
20.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the COVID. Yeah, it's fine. The COVID X amount of the COVID X plus amount.
Yes,
Yeah, that.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of like a. Yep. Just sort of
Yes.
a. Yeah, that's right. I have been just eating nothing but junk food while staying in my house.
Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that every once in a while, right?
Yeah, but just once you're starting to be able to track the days of the week by like the number of chocolate bars you've had, it's just sort of like, oh, that's a problem.
A little bit,
That's
a little bit. Depends on what chocolate. Okay, favorite chocolate bars. Top three.
Snickers. Snickers.
Okay,
Okay, you know, Snickers
we're
for the
friends
first
for a
one.
reason, and you've proved it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I would say, did we just become I would say this thing. Did we just become best friends? Yup.
Yes.
Oh yeah, no, I was just Snickers. Absolutely. I would say close second Mars bar, and you know, number three is Twix. I like caramel. I like caramel plus something else in a chocolate bar.
No, that's fair. I'm not gonna lie, this is the most casual conversation I've had on these things. I love it.
All right, I've just slow again. I resist rails. I do not. I would say I do not do well with rails.
No,
I was
no,
just
I
like,
love it.
guys, we're going iced tea and chocolate bars. That's what we're doing.
I started this with the iced tea, so you know it's had to ask.
Yep, I would say start. I would say starts out with career, ends with
Chocolate bars.
iced tea and chocolate bars.
With that being said, like I think we've covered all the topics. Is there any other closing thoughts or any words of wisdom you would have for people, or any suggestions in regards to that? Oh yeah, we're going serious again.
All right, live together before we get married.
Okay, that actually sounds like good advice.
Nope, I would just say that's sort of the genuine sort of thought of live together before you get married.
Mhm.
And also, for all intents and purposes, um, if you know there's something that makes you happy, make a conscious effort to add it into your, like to try and put it more into your life.
Mm. Okay, I love that.
Also, also,
Great.
Explain is now live on most podcast streams, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you
Perfect.
can rate, review, and download my entire back catalog, it would be very much appreciated.
Conversation with a friend viewers, like check out Mr. B's Braden Thorvaldsen's What Explained podcast. He's done an amazing job, and he's just as entertaining in that as he was through all of this. So, with probably
With a
less
lot less
side,
cursing. With a lot less cursing.
just yeah, yeah, and probably less side rails, but all good. No,
Just a little bit.
there you go. Yeah, and thanks again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, Diver. It was a pleasure.